Hi, I'm attorney Gregory Dell, joined by attorney Rachel Alters. And Rachel, I'm excited for this particular video because it's not our usual topic, and this is really a general disability insurance video and talking about different aspects of disability insurance policies and ultimately whether or not, as attorneys who help people all over the country to get paid on these policies, whether or not we recommend that people go out and secure these disability policies or take them as a benefit from their employer. So right off the bat, Rachel, what's your take on whether or not a person should get a disability insurance policy?
They absolutely should. There is no question in my mind, Greg, that everybody should have a disability policy no matter where they work, no matter how much money they make. It is very important to have a disability policy to protect you if all of a sudden one day you get sick, get in an accident, something happens where you can't go to work for an extended period of time, and how are you going to pay for your mortgage, groceries, medical bills, everything. So, most people say, well, I don't see myself ever needing it. Those are the people that usually need the disability policies. So I 100% recommend that everybody get a policy from their employer and also buy a policy on their own if they can.
Okay, so Rachel, we obviously, the only thing we do is help people with disability insurance claims, whether they're applying, where they've been denied. Those are basically the two scenarios, and also helping people once they do get on claim to stay on claim. But like the media, people hear negative things, and of course we publish, we write articles and we have videos about all of the things that can happen or go wrong with a disability insurance claim. But the question that people who, like when I see friends or just talking to different people randomly and I tell them what I do, they say, don't those people always deny those claims? What's the truth about how often these claims are approved for disability insurance benefits?
Well, the truth, Greg, is that most of the claims are approved. The calls that we get all day long are the ones that aren't approved, so we see all the negative. But there are many claims that the insurance carriers do approve. And I do have clients who call me all the time and they say, well, I should never have gotten this insurance policy. It was no good. What was the point? And the truth of the matter is, once they hire me and I help them with the claim and I get them approved, or we end up getting them a good settlement, they're always happy that they had the policy. It's just in the moment where they get denied, they're upset and they say that the policies aren't good, I should never have had this. The truth of the matter is, everybody should have an insurance policy, even if you have to fight to get the carrier to approve the claim.
Right, and Rachel, when you and I were talking about, before we went on air about this particular video, we talked about, look, disability insurance companies, they're like every other insurance company. They're not just going to dish out money for a claim. If you're watching this video, you probably have health insurance, you probably have auto insurance, you probably have homeowners insurance or renters insurance. Those are usually the most common forms of insurance. If you've ever had to have a claim before, there's requirements that you have to satisfy. And all of these insurance companies, no matter what kind of claim, they don't just dish out the money. You have to go through the hoops. You have to follow the terms and conditions of the policy. And as we often say, Rachel, you got to know how to play the game so that you can put your claim in the best position possible to get paid. And that same strategy applies to whether it's short-term or long-term disability insurance claims. So there are some statistics from some National Association of Disability Insurance Companies that say that 90% of disability insurance claims are approved. I'm not sure necessarily. It may be that high, but the question is, does approval mean that you're going to stay on claim, and is the company going to continue to pay you for as long as you need those benefits? And likely there's going to come a period of time where if you're not following everything or they do a review of the claim, that they're going to reach a point where they're going to say, we don't think you have the restrictions and limitations or the medical support anymore to meet the definition of disability. So that's what we do in terms of helping people at any stage of a disability claim. But Rachel, for the person out there who's saying, look, I like to hear the opinions of the person who I would go to if I have to file a claim, if I have a problem with a claim. So what would you recommend to somebody, Rachel, in terms of if they're looking to buy a policy on their own? What's the best type of policy that they could buy?
Well, if you're buying an individual policy that you're getting from a broker, I would say the best type of policy to buy is an own occupation policy that will cover you until you are at least age 65, under whether you cannot perform the material substantial duties of your own occupation. So what that means is at the time you purchase the policy, whatever your occupation is, whether you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you're a legal secretary, you own a pharmaceutical company, whatever it is that you do is your own occupation. So that if you become disabled and you can't do your specific job, the insurance carrier will pay you your monthly benefits, but you can go and do another job. So you could go be a teacher, you could review medical records if you are a nurse and can no longer do anything because of a physical injury. You could actually, review records and sit at a desk all day and still earn money in another job while you're getting paid under this policy. So I would say that a true own occupation policy is the best policy to purchase. They may be a little more expensive, but it's extremely worth it.
So I always explain to people when they don't know about these disability insurance policies, and I tell them that buying a disability insurance policy is like buying a car. And the reason for that is that there are a lot of options available. You can get leather, no leather, sunroof, no sunroof, V6, V8, turbo, all kinds of different things. And in the disability insurance world, there's all kinds of different terms and conditions that you can put into the policy. And Rachel, you mentioned the most important one, which is a true ONOC definition of disability. But you could also spend a lot less money, and these policies are billed on an annual basis where you pay monthly, and you could get maybe an own occupation definition of disability that lasts for 2 years, and then after that it changes to an any occupation definition of disability, which means that you're unable to perform the duties of any gainful occupation for which you have experience, education, and training. Obviously, you would rather have an own occupation definition which covers the duties of your occupation at the time you became disabled, as opposed to any occupation where, no, it's not going to exactly be flipping burgers, but it could be a job where they say, we think that you could be a security guard, or we think that you could be a librarian. Something really simple that you would probably have the qualifications to do, but is nothing like the skills of what you used to do. So, you can get an elimination period, Rachel, which is the period of time that you have to be unable to work for before you're eligible. You can buy 30 days, you can buy 90, 180, or a year. The longer you wait, the lower the premium is going to be. So, and then Rachel, you mentioned a policy that pays to age 65. There's some policies that only pay for 24 months, 5 years, lifetime if you're disabled before maybe age 45, or some just have a lifetime, they'll pay your whole life. Obviously the lifetime is going to be a lot more money. Rachel, what's COLA, cost of living increase, and why would somebody want that in their policy?
Yeah, it's really important for a lot of people to buy a policy with a cost of living increase option, because what that means is that if you have a benefit amount that's, let's say, $6,000 a month, if it has a COLA, depending if that's 2%, 4%, whatever the interest rate is at the time, then your benefit will go up and it will increase. And that benefit can possibly increase while you're not on claim, or it could increase once you get approved. It depends on the language in the policy. But a COLA is really, really good option because it doesn't usually cost that much to have in the policy, and it can increase the benefit greatly.
And then Rachel, in terms of, you were talking about own occupation definition of disability, but even in these individual disability policies, there's still this national economy definition of an occupation. So can you explain what that is, and why, if someone's trying to pierce out what the best policy language is, that they should stay away from the national economy own occupation definition?
Sure. So if the insurance carrier places the language in the policy that says if you become disabled from your own occupation, and they define own occupation as it's defined in the national economy, that is where they rely on the definition from the Dictionary of Occupational Titles, or ONET, to define what your job is. So they will look that up, and it'll, that will provide a list of occupational duties for, let's say, a sales manager. But your job could be completely different from what the national economy defines your job as. So you could have, you could be required to travel, multiple times a month, to lift heavy boxes, to be in sales meetings, all kinds of different things as a sales manager that you're required in your specific job to do aren't necessarily what they define in the national economy, which can hurt a claim. Because if the insurance carrier goes by this national economy definition and then you say, well, I got to get on a plane multiple times a month and I can't do this with my disability, the insurance carrier won't even consider that because it's not listed in the, in the occupational duties in the national economy. So what I always recommend to my clients or people who ask me is when you're going to buy an individual policy, make sure it's, the definition of own occupation is as it's defined at the job that you're performing today, which means you give a list of your occupational duties, what you're required to do every day when you go into work, and that is what the insurance carrier is supposed to follow.
And then Rachel, talk about limitations that can be found in a policy, and also you can pay premiums and get these limitations taken out of the policies.
Absolutely. I mean, the most common one to see in these insurance policies is a mental nervous limitation. And a lot of people don't realize that these are thrown into the policies until they make a claim for a mental nervous claim for depression or anxiety or anything else that falls under mental nervous, which could be bipolar disorder or schizophrenia sometimes. So what happens is they will limit payments under these disabilities for 24 months only during the lifetime of the policy. So if you're 45 years old and you make a claim under your insurance policy for depression and anxiety, they will only pay you for 24 months. And that means that if you have, some of the policies will allow multiple claims, but the most strict policies will only allow it to be paid one time, so that if you are depressed or you get anxiety again, or it never goes away, you can no longer get paid under those disabilities. So I tell people there's certain companies that will have no mental nervous limitations in their policies. They may cost a little bit more, but it's 100% worth purchasing those policies because it is a very common disability to claim. This is why they put the limitations in there, because when somebody does experience depression and anxiety, it's often very disabling and can last for many, many years. So that is one of the limitations that I say, if you can get that out of the policy, it's worth paying for.
And then the other thing is that a claimant should understand that when they apply, meaning when they're going out to buy their policies and they apply for these things, number one, you have to be 100% honest about every single thing on every question that you get asked. Because if you are untruthful or even forget something, it's possible that when you go to file your claim, that the disability insurance company will say that you misrepresented on your application and therefore your policy is void. They'll give you back your premiums that you paid, but they're not going to cover your claim. And that's the first thing they do, is a pre-existing condition and a verification of everything that you put on that application. So if you think you went to a doctor 5 years ago or 2 years ago before you apply and you don't tell them about it, and then 20 years from now, I have seen where claimants 20 years later make a claim and they see something in a note that related back to something that wasn't disclosed on the application, and they void or attempt to avoid the entire policy. So you have to be 100% honest about every single thing, because it will affect you later. You might get the policy now, but your policy may be worthless because you weren't truthful in your application. So that's a tremendous issue that you have to be aware of. The other thing, Rachel, is that when you do, and as people get older, they've had treatment for certain things in their lives, doesn't mean you can't get disability coverage. But what the disability company may do is they may put a rider on your policy. Can you explain, Rachel, what the rider is and what the significance of having a rider on your disability policy would be?
Absolutely. So oftentimes I will, get the question of, oh, well, if I try and buy a disability policy now, there's no way I'm going to get coverage because I have this herniated disc in my back and, I don't think that they're ever going to cover me. So the truth is that is correct. They will probably put an exclusion on your policy, and it's a rider that says that they will cover you for pretty much any and all disabilities other than the back issue that you currently have. So if you try and make a claim down the road for that specific back condition, it's going to be excluded. However, if you become sick with something else, if you get Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or something else comes about that doesn't involve that specific area of the back, then the insurance company is required to cover you. So it doesn't hurt to get a policy with an exclusion. It's better off than having no policy at all.
And then the other thing, Rachel, I want to talk about that is a strong point to having your own individual policy, even if you have one through your employer, is the fact that that policy with your employer is only good for as long as you continue to have employment with that employer. So,
right.
You know, if you work for, call it Amazon, and you have a disability policy with them, and then you end up switching jobs or you get fired, and you're not disabled at the time that you get your new job or you're fired, then your policy's done. Same thing if you're a professor at a university and you go to a new job, you lose your policy that you had for years. And then if you go to try to buy an individual policy because you think you've had group coverage for 10 or 15 years, it's going to be 2 or 3 times the expense that it used to be. So obviously age is a big factor. The younger you are, the less expensive it's going to be. The healthier you are, the less expensive these policies are going to be. But the group policies of disability are not portable. Sometimes you can convert them to an individual policy, but it's very rare. Usually when you leave your employment, you lose your policy. And that's scary because, you know, people stay at a job for 10 years or so. Not everyone is a lifetime employee with the same employer. And now you go to a new employer, they may not have group disability insurance, and that may be why you're considering buying new coverage now. But it would have been nice to have your own individual policy that goes with you. And Rachel, the other thing is that disability policy, when you buy it on your own, if you bought it, and let's just be extreme and say that you were a cardiac surgeon at the time you bought your policy, but you changed careers later in life and you became a carpenter because you didn't want to do heart surgery anymore. Now your policy, and then you have an injury or a sickness while you're a carpenter, your individual policy is going to cover you from your occupation as a carpenter, not as a cardiac surgeon. It's going to be the job you were performing at the time you became disabled. And that's very valuable because the policy is fluid and it follows you throughout your life to cover you no matter what you're doing. So that's
right.
a great form of insurance, and another reason why you really, really want to have your individual policy, and you really want to keep your individual policy if you go from one occupation to another occupation, you know, down the road. So, Rachel, I know we could go on and on about, you know, the pros and cons and every single little provision within each disability insurance policy. When your agent says, do you want this? Do you want that? I mean, we could do a 20-minute video on the pros and cons and the issues that come up with every single nuance in the policy because we've seen every issue. And these policies are 25 pages on average anyhow of terms and conditions of things that have to be complied with. But if you're looking for a policy, there's a lot of great agents out there that sell these particular policies. I highly recommend that you speak with someone who is extremely experienced in selling these policies. There's certain agents that focus on doctors or certain agents that focus on business people. There's some agents that just know how to handle everybody. So through Rachel, myself, any of our lawyers, we're happy to make recommendations for you to other people. We're also available to take a look at a policy or answer questions for you. We encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel because as you go through this process, we're always every week providing claim tip videos of things that you should be aware of. God forbid down the road you need to file a disability insurance claim. We want to be there to help you in the future should you need us. And then also you can, you know, ultimately, and you're probably wondering, well, they didn't say anything about which company should I buy a policy from. And we have our opinions about which are good, which are bad, which are better for which occupations, or all kinds of different things, which offer which language. They're all different in their own ways, and you can search through our website, look up your company and look at the different stories and the reviews. Most importantly, we have a lot of reviews about all of the companies, probably one of the greatest resources on the entire internet for reviews of disability insurance companies so that you can get a flavor for who's doing what. But feel free to give any of our lawyers a call. We'll express our opinions to you about which companies we think you should go with, or what things you should really have in your policy. So thank you for tuning into our video, and should you need us in the future, we look forward to helping you.